The day Madison Torres walked into our compliance meeting and called my 18 years of healthcare experience legacy overhead with a pension plan, I knew Health First Solutions was about to learn a $10.5 million lesson. She had that entitled MBA energy, designer blazer worth more than most people's monthly salary, perfectly styled hair like she was auditioning for a healthcare startup commercial, and eyes that scanned our organizational chart like she was shopping for deadweight to eliminate. Madison was 29, Chief Innovation Officer, and the CEO's daughter. She didn't shake hands. She did that weird finger wave thing millennials do, tossed around phrases like healthcare 4.0 and digital transformation paradigm while sipping a $12 green juice like she'd personally invented electronic medical records. Nobody had asked her to present at our quarterly compliance review. Nobody stopped her either. I'm Zach Coleman, by the way. 52 years old, been doing healthcare compliance since these kids were learning to tie their shoes. 7 years as Health First's designated HIPAA security officer, 18 years total in healthcare privacy protection. I've witnessed data breaches that would make your hair curl, watched hospitals get fined into bankruptcy over patient privacy violations, and spent nearly 2 decades building safeguards that actually work in the real world, not just on paper. 2 federal audits under my belt with 0 violations. A compliance track record that spoke for itself, apparently in a language Madison had never bothered to learn. She clicked through a PowerPoint presentation titled Operational Excellence Initiative Phase 1. Phase 1, as it turned out, was me. I'd been the federally designated HIPAA security officer for Health First Solutions since 2016. That's 7 years of ensuring patient data stayed private, building privacy controls from scratch, documenting every conceivable way our electronic health record system could be compromised. I maintained a filing cabinet in my office labeled, "If you terminate me, read this first." Nobody had ever bothered to open it. Madison clearly didn't know what a HIPAA security officer actually did on a daily basis. During her presentation, I watched her quickly Google HIPAA compliance requirements on her laptop. That morning, standing there in her father's corner office with its view of Lake Michigan, she dismissed privacy compliance as an administrative support function and suggested we leverage AI-driven oversight protocols to optimize operational efficiency. My analysis shows this department represents redundant functionality in our automated compliance ecosystem, she announced, like she'd just discovered a cure for cancer. $180,000 per year in total savings. That's executive bonus territory, people. A few nervous chuckles came from the marketing team. I didn't join in. I just capped my pen, closed my compliance notebook, and asked calmly, "Are we finished here?" Madison left the meeting with her laptop and that smug little head tilt she'd probably perfected at Harvard Business School. I returned to my office and opened a fresh documentation binder. What drove my next actions wasn't anger or hurt feelings, it was professional protocol, federal protocol they were about to violate in spectacular fashion. I started systematically copying files, every access log from the past 7 years, every privacy impact assessment, every incident response report, every single piece of documentation that established my role as the legally designated responsible party. Most critically, I documented every place where my name appeared as the federal point of contact. Health First's entire HIPAA compliance framework still revolved around my formal designation with the Department of Health and Human Services. Under 45 CFR 164.308, specifically the Administrative Safeguards section, healthcare organizations must maintain a designated security officer. Nobody had initiated the federal replacement process. Nobody could legally assume my responsibilities without filing specific paperwork with HHS and notifying our Medicare Contracts Division. But Madison didn't understand federal healthcare regulations. Hell, I doubt she'd ever read the actual HIPAA statute. Initially, I thought maybe someone would apply the brakes, that perhaps HR would recognize the federal implications, that Chuck Torres, the CEO who'd once called me the guardian angel of patient privacy, might question the decision. Nothing happened. 3 days later, HR delivered new job classification paperwork. My official title changed to Privacy Coordinator. My federal security clearance was downgraded. My administrative access to the compliance database vanished overnight. I smiled, nodded professionally, even congratulated Madison when she bragged about streamlining legacy processes in the hallway outside my newly assigned cubicle. She responded with a thumbs up and started calling me Z-Man. Meanwhile, I printed my original HIPAA designation letter, the one signed by the board in 2016, and emailed it to my personal account with a timestamp. I made 2 hard copies, one for my home office filing system, another for a binder I labeled Healthcare Continuity Risk. Federal requirement, do not discard. That second binder found its way into legal's document storage room. I didn't announce it or send memos. People assume revenge has to be loud, dramatic, full of shouting and door slamming and passionate exit speeches about unappreciated dedication. But nobody notices a time bomb either until it detonates. The following Wednesday brought another meeting. Madison, wearing a $400 blazer that screamed nepotism, clicked to slide 8 of her latest presentation like she was unveiling the next iPhone. The title read, Healthcare Innovation Phase 1 Results. I sat in the back corner, flanked by 2 members of my soon-to-be-eliminated privacy team, already sensing the corporate guillotine behind her buzzword-heavy language. My left eye developed a slight twitch when I saw my department listed under operational redundancies successfully eliminated. She hadn't even spelled my name correctly on the slide, just Z. Coleman, Legacy Privacy Lead. Good afternoon, everyone, Madison began like we were discussing the cafeteria menu instead of dismantling federal compliance infrastructure. I'm excited to share our first major efficiency breakthrough. Healthcare privacy oversight is increasingly automated in 2023. Platforms like Secure Health Pro and Compliance Bot mean we don't need traditional oversight roles anymore. We've successfully transitioned 2 full-time positions and restructured the privacy function for annual savings of $180,000. She looked up from her laptop, smiled like she'd just solved healthcare inefficiency. That's a Tesla Model S, folks. I stared at her like she'd just announced we were switching to an honor system approach to patient confidentiality. A few uncomfortable chuckles emerged from the business development side of the conference table. Madison moved forward without missing a beat, clearly interpreting silence as approval. We're transitioning all oversight responsibilities to a dashboard-driven system integrated with our existing EHR platform. You'll still have visibility into compliance metrics, Zach. She gestured toward me like I was outdated office equipment they were keeping for sentimental reasons. You're not being eliminated, just right-sized for modern healthcare realities. Privacy protection is about automated processes, not individual personalities. That moment crystallized 2 important realizations. First, Madison possessed 0 understanding of what I actually accomplished during my daily work. Second, nobody in that boardroom was going to challenge her logic, no matter how fundamentally flawed. Chuck Torres, her father and our CEO, sat nodding like she was explaining advanced quantum physics. HR representatives avoided making eye contact with anyone. Legal's summer intern took detailed notes and appeared genuinely impressed by the presentation. My direct reports sat frozen, clearly expecting me to voice some objection or at least ask clarifying questions. I chose a different approach. Instead, I uncapped my pen, wrote 45 CFR 164.308A2 in the margin of my notepad, and delivered the smallest, most professional, most potentially devastating smile in corporate history. Understood completely, I said with practiced calm. That was my entire response. No protest about federal requirements, no speech about regulatory complexity, no explanation of the legal minefield they were wandering into blindfolded. Just the quiet sound of my portfolio closing as I stood and exited the conference room. Madison looked genuinely confused, like she'd expected applause or at least some follow-up questions about transition timelines. I provided neither. I walked directly to my office and began the systematic process of downloading every audit record from the past 7 years. HIPAA protocols, administrative access logs, breach response documentation, safeguard implementation reports, everything that established my role as the federally designated responsible party. I encrypted complete copies on my personal drive and created an additional backup on a thumb drive I kept in a coffee mug labeled World's Most Adequate Privacy Officer, a gag gift from my team that had become oddly prophetic. Next, I printed the complete version history of our healthcare continuity plan, paying special attention to Section 7.4, buried deep under emergency procedure boilerplate where nobody ever bothered reading. That section outlined a federal requirement I'd personally inserted 3 years earlier, Designated HIPAA security officers must be formally replaced within 30 calendar days, or the organization automatically enters federal non-compliance status. I'd added that clause after watching a hospital system in Ohio absorb a $2.8 million penalty for mishandling their officer transition during a merger. I'd written the policy myself, signed off on the implementation, and watched the board approve it unanimously during a routine quarterly review. Madison wouldn't recognize that clause if it appeared in 72-point font with flashing neon arrows pointing directly at it. HR called later that same afternoon to confirm my role realignment. They explained I'd now report to the Director of Administrative Services with new responsibilities including document management and process observation. I responded positively and asked about my new identification badge timeline. They said I could continue using my existing credentials. I nearly laughed out loud. That evening I stayed late in the office, printing and organizing a comprehensive binder containing designation letters, HIPAA audit trails, every federal filing where my name appeared as the legally responsible authority. I attached a bright yellow sticky note to the cover, healthcare continuity risk, federal requirement, do not discard. I personally delivered that binder to legal's document storage room. Third shelf, middle section, positioned between routine contract archives and quarterly compliance reports from 2019. No security cameras monitored that area. No witnesses observed my filing activities. Just me, fluorescent lighting, and approximately 500 boxes of corporate documentation that might someday become crucial evidence. After completing that task, I drove home through Chicago's evening traffic, prepared a simple dinner, and didn't waste emotional energy on self-pity. I wasn't being eliminated from the organization. I was being systematically transformed into a regulatory time bomb with a 30-day fuse. Let them assume I'd accepted defeat gracefully. Let them believe 18 years of healthcare compliance expertise could be replaced by automated dashboard monitoring. Let them celebrate their $180,000 efficiency victory while remaining completely unaware of the federal tripwire they'd just activated. 5 days after Madison's streamlining success, HR delivered a gift basket to my new cubicle. Actual wicker construction, filled with artisanal cheese, expensive crackers, and some variety of organic jam that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The accompanying card read, "Thank you for your flexibility during this exciting period of organizational evolution." Signed with a cheerful smiley face from Janet in People Operations. I examined it for approximately 60 seconds before transporting it directly to the break room microwave area, abandoning it like a failed science experiment. The office atmosphere had shifted to something resembling a corporate celebration. My former colleagues developed sudden cases of selective blindness whenever I approached, like proximity to a demoted employee might prove contagious. Madison strutted through the hallways like someone who'd personally solved healthcare inefficiency, occasionally stopping to discuss her optimization breakthrough with anyone willing to listen. She started addressing me as coach, terminology that should have triggered immediate HR intervention, but from management's perspective, I was handling the transition with admirable professionalism. No angry emails demanding justice, no complaints filed with the board, no late-night calls to industry contacts threatening whistleblower actions. Just me in my smaller workspace, methodically organizing files, maintaining pleasant demeanor, requesting additional storage folders. The reality was more complex. I'd emotionally disconnected from Health First Solutions, operating with the detached focus of someone watching a slow-motion disaster unfold. But I wasn't mentally checked out. I was observing, documenting, preparing. During one coffee break, I overheard Madison bragging to the CFO's executive assistant near the copy machine. "He's gone in 2 weeks. We saved nearly $200,000 when you factor in benefits and overhead. That's budget for a complete data analytics team plus conference travel for the year." She actually exchanged high fives with someone over my position, over the regulatory framework that kept their patient data legally protected and federally compliant. Meanwhile, legal had asked exactly 0 questions about transition requirements, no requests for handoff documentation, no inquiries about designation updates, no concern about federal notification protocols. They simply processed my HR status change and continued business as usual, treating my role like a Netflix subscription they'd decided to cancel. That same afternoon, I accessed the Health and Human Services compliance portal and reviewed our current HIPAA designation record. Zachary Coleman, Security Officer, Designated Responsible Party, Board approval date March 15, 2016. Status: active and legally binding through current certification period. I exported the complete record and forwarded it to my personal email account with the subject line, "Reference documentation, future use." Then I took a purposeful walk to legal's document storage area. The room maintained library-quality silence, the kind of atmospheric quiet that makes you conscious of your own breathing patterns. I positioned the carefully prepared binder on the third shelf, middle section, labeled it with bold black permanent marker. Healthcare continuity risk, federal requirement, do not discard. It found a permanent home next to archived audit reports and a dusty container labeled Q2 Compliance Documentation 2019. Just another seemingly routine record waiting to transform into essential evidence. That evening, I drove home through Chicago's rush hour traffic and opened a beer that somehow tasted like vindication mixed with approaching professional justice. In my home office, I renamed the digital backup files with systematic precision: HIPAA designation active current.pdf, Federal Contact Authority trail.pdf, Board Resolution 2016's backup PDF, each cross-referenced and time-stamped. I even exported metadata as separate JSON files, anticipating potential future claims of document tampering or unauthorized modification. Some professionals spend entire careers desperately trying to gain recognition and visibility. I'd built mine by understanding exactly where regulatory tripwires were installed and how they functioned when activated. My fundamental error had been assuming someone would follow established federal protocols when I eventually departed. That there would be proper handoff procedures, that legal would insist on HHS notification requirements, that HR would recognize eliminating a federally designated position without board action constituted more than unprofessional behavior. It represented regulatory negligence with criminal implications. But management wanted smooth operations and immediate cost savings. Smooth meant pretending healthcare privacy operated like switching cable television providers, not maintaining complex federal compliance frameworks. So I allowed them to maintain that illusion. I let them experiment with matches and gasoline in a regulatory environment constructed entirely from patient privacy laws and federal oversight requirements. I submitted my formal resignation on a Thursday morning at precisely 7:43 a.m. Early enough to avoid administrative chaos, late enough to ensure delivery coincided with Janet's second cup of coffee and her daily motivational podcast routine. Clean, professional, legally unambiguous. Effective 2 weeks from today's date, I will be stepping down from my position as privacy coordinator. No farewell lunch gatherings, no company-wide announcements, no awkward Slack discussion threads where people pretend to miss someone they'd already forgotten worked there. I systematically packed my personal desk items, deliberately leaving behind the coffee mug Madison had presented during her first week, the one emblazoned with "Innovation starts here." The irony felt too painful to preserve. Health First's IT department revoked my system access before lunch period. Standard operational procedure, they explained. Maximum efficiency. I genuinely wanted to laugh. Their IT ticket processing moved so rapidly they forgot to disable my compliance portal visibility settings. I retained access to upcoming federal audit schedules and regulatory filing deadlines. My name had vanished from contact lists, but Madison appeared as interim privacy lead, a title that existed nowhere in our federal documentation. The HR exit processing packet contained multiple errors: incorrect job classification, wrong salary history, benefits information intended for someone 2 organizational levels below my actual position. The final checkbox indicated federal designation transfer, complete with an empty signature field. 0 transition documentation, no HHS notification logged, no formal replacement designated through proper channels. From their perspective, the compliance system had simply absorbed my responsibilities through technological osmosis. That weekend, I updated my professional certification status on the Healthcare Privacy Professionals portal, setting my HIPAA designation to active, organization departed, uploading my resignation acceptance letter with timestamp verification, ensuring public searchability for regulatory verification purposes. By Monday morning, I had received 4 professional inquiries. One from a boutique healthcare consulting firm specializing in regulatory crisis management, one from a medical technology startup navigating FDA approval processes, one from a hospital system whose logo I recognized from recent merger headlines, and one from the compliance division of a company I couldn't name without smirking at the irony. I signed a 6-month consulting agreement and established a quiet workspace in a professional business center with reliable internet connectivity and surprisingly decent coffee. The building manager, Helen, addressed everyone as Han and maintained a candy dish stocked with peppermints like she was preserving 1995 office culture. Health First Solutions continued operating without noticeable disruption. No internal messaging inquiring about my well-being, no status check meetings, no backward glances toward regulatory implications. Just another eliminated line item from payroll expenses and reduced holiday party catering requirements. But what they couldn't perceive, what they fundamentally refused to acknowledge, was that I hadn't been their weak operational link. I had served as their regulatory anchor point. Without proper federal notification procedures, the HIPAA designation remained incomplete and legally problematic. Without board documentation, compliance filings still identified me as the responsible authority. And without a properly designated officer, their federal audit timeline was operating with a dead battery. 4 months into Madison's corporate victory celebration, Health First's offices resembled a movie set designed for billion-dollar success stories. Conference rooms remained booked solid for weeks in advance. The employee break room received a premium espresso machine upgrade. Suddenly, everyone possessed new business cards and professionally updated LinkedIn profiles. Madison had traded her designer blazers for custom-tailored suits she probably never wore twice. She moved through hallways like someone who'd personally invented efficient healthcare management. The $485 million merger with Mid-State Healthcare Systems represented her opportunity to demonstrate that optimization strategies involved more than buzzwords and elimination spreadsheets. Mid-State, a massive hospital conglomerate known for acquiring streamlined healthcare companies, embraced her presentation enthusiastically. Her pitch emphasized aggressive operational streamlining, automated compliance monitoring, and privacy as a platform solutions that would revolutionize patient data protection. Madison coined a new term for her methodology: RegTech integration, MBA terminology. For we eliminated personnel and Hope software prevents federal violations. Due diligence commenced with considerable enthusiasm. Madison served as primary contact for operational reviews, spending entire days in meetings with buyer representatives, confidently responding to questions she barely comprehended. Legal teams from both organizations maintained consistent communication that everything was progressing according to schedule, except progress was actually stalling, because buried within Mid-State's downtown legal offices, an overqualified junior paralegal named Kevin was methodically cross-referencing federal compliance records against current employee rosters. Kevin wasn't originally assigned to healthcare privacy verification. Someone had called in sick, and he'd volunteered for additional responsibilities. That's when Kevin discovered the discrepancy that would detonate everything. One record clearly identified Zachary Coleman as Health First's designated HIPAA security officer, board-approved, federally filed, valid through the current certification period. But Zachary Coleman wasn't listed on their current employee roster. No replacement designation documentation, no federal notification records, no transition paperwork whatsoever. Kevin flagged the inconsistency in a detailed footnote, categorizing it under administrative gaps, requiring clarification and assuming someone would address the obvious oversight. Nobody did. The audit team glossed over his findings. Legal marked it low priority since it didn't directly impact revenue projections. Madison reviewed the HIPAA compliance section, scribbled handled through integrated platform in the margins, and uploaded everything to Mid-State's buyer portal without additional scrutiny. For several weeks, merger preparations continued smoothly. Press releases were drafted and approved. Chuck Torres booked an extended Mediterranean vacation. Madison began discussing relocation to Mid-State's corporate headquarters, referencing something called strategic integration leadership opportunities. Meanwhile, I observed these developments from my small business center office, consuming coffee that didn't taste like corporate defeat, while Helen argued with someone about conference room scheduling protocols. I felt no bitterness toward their apparent success. I was simply waiting with professional patience, because I understood regulatory realities they'd chosen to ignore. HIPAA compliance isn't mere paperwork or administrative formality. It represents a comprehensive federal framework anchored to a living, breathing, legally accountable human being. A designated officer, someone personally responsible for patient privacy protection, someone appointed through formal board action to stand before federal auditors and declare, yes, this organization maintains full compliance. Health First didn't have such a person. They hadn't maintained proper designation for 210 days and counting. The regulatory clause I'd inserted into their continuity planning documentation 3 years earlier was silently counting down like a federal time bomb positioned directly beneath their conference table. On the scheduled closing morning, Mid-State's legal team called an emergency suspension. The reason? Page 67 of compliance documentation, specifically the HIPAA Designated Officer Verification section. My name, Zachary Coleman, remained listed as the responsible party. No replacement signature, no federal notification, no transition documentation. You've been operating without designated federal compliance for 210 days, Mid-State's compliance director announced to the assembled Health First board. That's $50,000 daily in retroactive federal penalties. You're looking at $10.5 million in fines, plus criminal investigation possibilities. The $485 million merger collapsed by 2:30 p.m. Madison was terminated by 4:15 p.m. Chuck Torres submitted his resignation by 6:00 p.m. That afternoon, I received an email from Mid-State's compliance director. Zachary, we'd like to retain you for post-incident regulatory reconstruction. 12-month contract, $1.8 million. Complete operational autonomy. Sometimes the most effective revenge is simply following federal regulations everyone else forgot to read. Thanks for listening, everyone. In healthcare compliance, the rules always win eventually.